Actually, I've never spoken to anybody else about not having internet besides my sisters. I'm a senior in college studying sociology, and I grew up most of my life without internet access.
These days, access to the internet and broadband connectivity is the avenue to economic and social and cultural opportunities, so that those that are not connected are at a serious disadvantage. And it's growing worse day by day in the United States.
The digital divide is something that is being neglected in my experience.
I guess I just felt disappointed that we as a family couldn't afford it. I live in the Flatbush area of New York, Brooklyn, New York.
So I chose not to be identified mostly because of my parents. They're basically like, we came to the United States to give you and your sisters, all these chances at life and opportunities and everything. So I think they're especially worried that if you are seen as not fitting in some way, whether it's like you don't have proper clothes or something, or speak eloquently enough or something, or do well in school, or even something like not having internet, they see it as prohibitive in some way. So essentially they're just like, please don't be connected to this with your face.
I think digital equity transcends so many issues. It impacts income inequality. It impacts educational attainment. It impacts quality of life.
First time I asked my mom for the internet was probably around 16, probably a junior in high school. And it also might have been when my sister had moved back in, so my oldest sister. So she was probably saying that, she'd need it for job searches and that sort of thing too. So it wasn't just like, oh, Mom, we want to be like everyone else. We had valid reasons for needing it. So I think she was just kind of, it was just difficult for her because she didn't want to say no, since it was something that we obviously needed to, just help get ahead in life and stuff and get things done that are necessary, like applying for jobs and going to college.
Well, there are clear lines across socioeconomic and demographic grounds. So more affluent people have access to broadband in much higher numbers than poor people, and across racial lines as well. So non-Hispanic whites in the United States, 4 out of 5 have access to a broadband connection, and the numbers are considerably lower for blacks and Hispanics in the United States.
We have students here who are living in poverty, and who are first-generation immigrants and who are non-resident aliens, or even undocumented immigrants. So, although they may be poor, they find ways to gain internet access. Their parent, it's a very big priority for their parents.
This is a first world country. People just automatically assume it's something everyone has at home. Junior, senior year, my mom got, I can't remember, maybe Time Warner? Or, no, actually I think it was Optimum Online, because the way it works in our neighborhood, there are only, I think, 2 service providers you can choose from. So you're pretty much limited to those options.
It is unacceptable that the United States ranks 15th in the world in broadband adoption. Here in the country that invented the internet, every child should have the chance to get online. And they'll get that chance when I'm president, because that's how we'll strengthen America's competitiveness in the world.
The Obama administration, with the National Broadband Plan of 2 years ago, I believe, set out a number of measures that they hoped would boost internet connectivity rates, and they really have not been performing as well as we hoped they might be.
In other countries, they have less issues that get in the way of making broadband adoption possible. In the United States, we have a lot of issues with providers who have semi-monopolies or monopolies in the spaces where they are, and have no incentive to create more access points, create more opportunity, create lower cost access. They're making a lot of money with their current circumstance, so there's not really an incentive to change that.
Basically, people are left with pretty much one or two options. So it's unfair because if they can't afford those options, they have nowhere else to turn to. If you can't afford it, you're pretty much out of luck.
We haven't figured out how to make the shift there from being a luxury good for those who could afford to connect to a necessity.
It's complicated because I understood why we couldn't have it since my mom got behind on the bills and they had to cut it off. I did feel left out a little in high school.
My friends kind of like, oh, why aren't you on GChat or something? I could tell her because, she is a close friend, but it feels awkward to bring up because I'm just afraid she'll think like, oh no, she's poor. Now this is awkward. I don't know how to speak to her or something, and I kind of don't want her to see me differently.
So education level has a significant impact on broadband adoption as well. If you have less than a high school education, maybe 37% of the people are online. If you have a high school, it's 70%. If you have college, it jumps up to 90%.
It's going to marginalize people in so many different ways, almost as if to make them literally second-class citizens.
Specifically, I worry as an educator about how technology exacerbates an existing access gap. And I think a lot about how if we had two children, both taking, say, AP History, and the AP History teacher gives an assignment to the two children. One goes home, has access at home, and can work for hours researching, organizing information, writing a draft, sharing a draft, having somebody edit with them. And the other child goes to the library and stands in line and gets their half hour, sticks in a thumb drive, saves what they've got, and runs to the back of the line and does it again and again, and then hopefully has something that they can take to school in the morning and plug in the guidance office and print. And then the two of them present their paper to the teacher and they are judged on the exact same criteria. And that to me is just unconscionable. We can't accept that that's the way it needs to be. So we have to figure out how every child gets access and how they all have equitable opportunities to excel.
So right now we're sitting in a cafe a few blocks away from my home where I would come to use the internet. I would go to sometimes the library, but the cafe was more convenient because it'd be open earlier than the library and closed later than the library. So I went to a cafe near my home, and but to use their free Wi-Fi, you had to pretty much buy something so you can take up space. So I would try to buy the cheapest thing on the menu, like a small coffee. And I would go there a couple times a week so that I could sit there and I don't have the same time constraints as the library where you have 30 minutes on a computer. So luckily I had my own laptop.
A wireline connection to the house is very, very important. To be able to bring your homework home with you and have access to the wealth of the internet is a big departure from having to do it in a McDonald's or doing it on your smartphone.
At least for me, I didn't want to be at the same place all the time so that people didn't know. So I guess people would be surprised how much work goes into kind of plotting out where I'll go next to get internet. Not having internet is not only not being at the same level as people, it's detrimental. The short time that we did have internet at home, my mom basically bought it so I could be able to apply to colleges. Now that I'm at school, having internet everywhere, I was like, oh my God, this is insane. Like, what? There's no limit. I don't have to worry about, going to the library all day or something. I could just work on from my room. It was a pretty huge change. I don't know. I thought it was really fun. I was like kind of a kid getting a gift again or something. But it was just so funny because, no one else thought twice about it. I was just kind of like, how do I get into the network? Okay, I'm on. Done.
Pretty impressive how technology has really taken over so many of the functions of our lives and how we don't really realize it until we're without it. And then you realize how impactful it is for the folks who've never had it.
It's difficult being social at home without internet because basically that's how I keep in touch with my friends since everyone is from different parts of the country and stuff like that. They'll be like, oh, why aren't you on GChat or let's Skype or something like that. and I can't because, I don't have internet at home.
I think there's some clarity that we're very far behind a lot of other countries. I think there's clarity that it's impacting our capacity to provide workers who are ready for the workforce. I think it's impacting academics, job growth. All of those things are becoming impacted, and because of that, I think we will begin to see some movement.
So I'm sitting there like, oh wow, like there are all these words I don't know. So I constantly have a tab open that says like define blank, so I can just Google the word. So having an internet is really great, especially in terms of getting schoolwork done once I get in the mood of schoolwork. But also it's great for everything, procrastination, keeping in touch with my friends, looking up plans for the future because I don't want to graduate, but I have to. So yeah, I feel like if like the internet were to crash tomorrow, I wouldn't know what to do with myself.
For us to think that we should put more money here or there and ignore this issue would be foolish.
If every single student in New York City had access to the internet, I think we would be having a different conversation about education.
Why aren't people talking about this issue?
Broadband connectivity and access to the digital world becomes one more point of departure between those that have access to more opportunities for advancement and those that have fewer, then we're in trouble. We really need to close that gap.
Do we have the will to make it happen? Is it important enough, and do we care enough about the folks who have and the folks who do not to actually have an impact?
I think the digital divide is a big deal because it's one way in which we kind of reinforce inequality in the society.